All right, everyone. Welcome back to Words of Others. We are ready. I think it's time to dive back into the 6-part series by Cory Morningstar about the manufacturing of Greta Thunberg. And this is Act 2, which is called For Consent, The Inconvenient Truth Behind Youth Co-optation, published on The Art of Annihilation as well as The Wrong Kind of Green websites on January 21, 2019. So this is Act 2, and just to remind you of what Cory is up to in Acts 1 and 2. In Act 1, she disclosed that Greta Thunberg, the current child prodigy and face of the youth movement to combat climate change, served as a special youth advisor and trustee to the foundation established by We Don't Have Time, which is a burgeoning mainstream tech startup. She then explored the ambitions behind the tech company We Don't Have Time. Here in Act 2, she's going to illustrate how today's youth are the sacrificial lambs for the ruling elite. I know that sounds slightly hyperbolic, but we should get into it to really understand. Also in the act, she introduces the board members and advisors of We Don't Have Time and explores the leadership in the nascent We Don't Have Time and the partnerships between the well-established corporate environmental entities, Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, 350.org, Avaaz, Global Utmaning, which means Global Challenge, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum. So let's get into it. She starts off to basically just give you kind of a look at the playing field and who are the folks on that field. So she calls this the We Don't Have Time players. And she starts with the We Don't Have Time Board of Directors, and it's comprised of the following people. And you may not remember all these names and everything they do, but it's a good way to kind of get started, get oriented. So I'll move through this relatively quickly, and then we'll dive into this piece of the series. So for We Don't Have Time, we have Ingmar Rentzhog, who is the founder and CEO of We Don't Have Time. We have Annette Nordvall, who is the We Don't Have Time chairwoman, shareholder, private tech investor, works with an organization called STOAF, S-T-O-A-F, which is a venture capital and private equity firm in Sweden, and she's also a venture partner with Capital A Partners. Then you have David Olson, and he's the We Don't Have Time Chief Operating Officer, and he's also chairman of the Swedish climate think tank called Global Utmaning, or Global Challenge. Christian Emmerts is the We Don't Have Time co-founder, business unit director at Hewlett-Packard, Sweden, partner at Real Cap Investment, and is also with the Climate Reality Project and was trained by Al Gore. So the Climate Reality Project is an Al Gore affiliated organization. You have Stella Diesen, who is changing the world with Microsoft Tech InnoFactor, formerly of Microsoft. I think this was some little tech offshoot they had. She's also with the Climate Reality Project. She was a leader trained by Al Gore. You have Gustav Stenbeck, who is the CEO of Mestro and the founder and executive chairman of Gain Sustain, which is an investment banking organization. He's also part of Global Utmaning, which translates to Global Challenge in English, as Cory explained before, was founded in 2005 by economist Christina Persson, Sweden's former Minister of Strategic Development and Nordic Cooperation. Persson was tasked with building cooperation with Nordic countries in order to leverage strength within the international community. Her position involved the fostering of long-term development for the green transition, jobs, and distribution, and initiatives to influence the global agenda for sustainable development, and that's a quote. And she is, with her siblings, part of the business empire established by her father, Sven O. Persson, which has a revenue of approximately $3 billion. And that's in U.S. dollars, $332,500,000 per annual. Persson is also the founder of the Freja Foundation, established in 2017. And then, so that was the board of directors. They also have a few additional members. Kathy Orlando, who's the National Director for Citizen Climate Lobby in Canada. Stuart Scott, Climate Reality Project leader trained by Al Gore. Per Espen Stokens, who's a researcher in behavioral economics. Again, you have Ingmar Renshag, who is the CEO, David Olson, the COO, Greta Thunberg, Special Youth Advisor and Trustee, and Jamie Margolin, Special Youth Advisor and Trustee. And they have a quick quote from We Don't Have Time that says this: "To ensure that our ambitious, value-driven agenda is not compromised, we have set up a good cause company, which means that the majority voting rights of the company belong to a charitable foundation. This foundation also owns the brand We Don't Have Time and receives a revenue-based fee from the company. If our platform is successful, these revenues will be substantial, and the foundation can use these funds to support people and organizations that fight the climate crisis." End quote, and that was from an article in Acquisition International Magazine, issue number 10 from 2018. Last bit is the advisory board of We Don't Have Time, and I'll go through this quickly. As I said, you have Daniel Rogosic, who is the global press officer of the IKEA group. That's important, that she'll come around to that. Tove Alstrom, who is the CEO of Global Challenge and an affiliate of Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. You have Anna Svan, who is CEO of Feminvest and CEO and co-founder at Cygnus Capital. You have Andra Farhad, who is founder and CEO of an organization called Borschagen. You have Kaj Torok, a Chief Reputation Officer and Chief Sustainability Officer of Max Burgers, and she's the co-founder of Futera, Marketing and Advertising. Then you have Sweta Chakraborty, a renowned risk and behavioral scientist, and David J.P. Phillips, founder of davidjpphillips.com, speakerrating.com, and presentationstechnic.com. And Phillips delivers training in presentation skills in over 16 countries. His expertise is based on the latest research in neurology, psychology, and biology as a means of effective storytelling and communicating. And I think Cory really got into that in the first piece in this series about the impact of narrative on these types of change operations. So now we dive in. Here's part 2, Manufacturing of Greta Thunberg. The presence of IKEA on the We Don't Have Time advisory board should be duly noted. In 2017, IKEA awarded a $44.6 million grant from the IKEA Foundation to the We Mean Business Coalition, which was founded in 2014. This grant was in fact, quote, the second largest single donation ever made by the charitable arm of retail giant IKEA, end quote. The We Mean Business Coalition founding members include the B Team, which is the Business for Social Responsibility, the Carbon Disclosure Project, Ceres, the Climate Group, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and the Prince of Wales Corporate Climate Group. Other We Mean Business partners include the United Nations Global Compact, the United Nations Environment Program, the UNEP Finance, that's again related to the United Nations, the World Bank, and the World Wildlife Fund. And for the full list, she's left a link there. The B Team is managed by Purpose, the for-profit public relations firm run by Avaaz co-founder Jeremy Hymans, who is a co-author of the book New Power. IKEA is a client of Purpose and partner to the Purpose NGO We Are Here Now. It's amazing all these organizations have virtually similar names. In the following excerpt from the January 28, 2016 Maclean's article, Have We Hit Peak Stuff?, IKEA says there's room to grow. The collective corporate climate fervor now sweeping the globe is demonstrated once again, and here's a quote from that article. So how to square IKEA's peak stuff talk with its buy more actions? A spokesperson volunteered in an email that Steve Howard's head of sustainability at IKEA comments were made as part of a wider global context where many people still have very limited means. While Sjöstrand suggested The goal was to continue to grow our business, but grow it in a more sustainable way. Translation: IKEA will sell you more furniture and home furnishings, but it will try harder not to make you feel guilty about it. Which explains why the company's corporate reports are festooned with examples of sustainability initiatives, from selling only LED-compatible lighting to serving responsibly harvested fish in the cafeteria. End quote. And here's Cory again. Sustainability and capitalism are like oil and water. The two are incompatible. They cannot coexist. The climate revolution sought by We Don't Have Time and its partner organizations doesn't contract mass consumption. It delivers new products in order to expand it. This clean energy revolution doesn't threaten big oil. It secures it. It doesn't weaken capitalism. It strengthens it. It doesn't inspire resistance. It quells it into oblivion. Here we can reflect on the most simple things that shed light on the ideologies shared by the majority of those at the helm of decision-making in addressing our climate crisis. In plain sight, what companies and institutions a person is most interested in are made public on one's LinkedIn account. Selected groups to follow, shared by the average nonprofit industrial complex professional, are rarely, if ever, groups, institutions, or people working within the realm of ecology, indigenous rights, social justice, environmental sciences, or other critical areas associated with climate change and environmental depletion. Nor are smaller institutions or individuals working towards small-scale local solutions of any interest. Rather, this interlocking directorate of TED Talkers and thought leaders most commonly select and follow the world's most powerful and successful finance and tech companies, and the marketing firms that propel them to their success. Rarely are institutions, groups, or people within the environmental sciences of interest, nor are smaller institutions or individuals working towards small-scale local solutions. The most popular institutions followed and shared by most of this crowd are comprised of white, Western leadership, predominantly male. Some of the most admired ones chosen by the many are the World Economic Forum, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, The Economist, the Green Climate Fund, groups and institutions they wholly identify with and seek to assimilate or belong to. Here we must recall the fact, disclosed in Act 1, that Al Gore's Climate Reality Project is a partner to We Don't Have Time. And here's a quick quote. Renshaw wants to effect change within business, not against business. And that's a quote from Annette Nordval, who's the chairman of We Don't Have Time. The sacrificial lambs, and she starts this section with a quote. The same hormones and neurotransmitters can be released by a good story. These include dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins, which Phillips refers to as the angel's cocktail. The effects of oxytocin make you more generous, trusting, and ready to bond. This is what is released in your blood when you hear a sad story. It makes us feel relaxed and more human as we bond to the storyteller. And that's based on the TEDx Stockholm talk, The Magical Science of Storytelling, by David J.P. Phillips, who, as we recall, is on the board of directors at We Don't Have Time. Here's Cory again. To begin this segment, we can look at the We movement, and that's capital W, capital E. And it's also called Me to We, Free the Children and We Day. The 2015 expose, Unleashing Voluntourism, produced by the Canadian Public Broadcasting, was originally scheduled to air on March 19, 2015. The documentary investigated the privatization or the NGOization of and the explosive growth of what has morphed into a billion-dollar industry, tourism masquerading as volunteerism for privileged youth in the West. Celebrity, fetishized in a rapidly eroding society void of meaning and culture, no editorializing there from Cory, has resulted in such a powerful asset to capitalism and militarism that the subject has become an active area of study by academics such as Dan Brockington and Ilan Kapoor. The power of celebrity was not lost on we, whose keynote speakers for massive gatherings and endorsements have included Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in a 2008 video, and again in 2015 following his election win, as well as former First Lady Michelle Obama, Hollywood's Natalie Portman, and a stream of others. Indeed, renting celebrities for galas and events has too become a niche industry. Shortly before it was to air, the documentary was pulled after we requested unauthorized footage be removed from the expose. When it did air, on April 7, 2017, 2 scenes had been cut off from the film. The following clip is one of the 2 deleted clips, and it's running time of a minute. I'll seed the link in SoundCloud so you can look at this post on the internet and you can watch the video. The controversy regarding we is far from over, as the NGO grapples to protect its million-dollar brand. On January 17, 2019, we announced they would commence legal action against a small podcast network and news outlet in Manitoba, Canada, where journalists have no explicit legal protection from what are called SLAPP lawsuits, and those are strategic lawsuits against public participation. Not least a bit Orwellian. This news outlet had been reporting on the we movement since 2015. The following images and brief commentaries are but a tiny glimpse into the world of youth co-optation, co-optation of both resistance and youth. Today we bear witness to what can aptly be described as the mechanisms and orchestrated movements of the nonprofit industrial spectacle. To illustrate the co-optation of youth, we will now look at the celebrity youth activists and climate reality leaders, Greta Thunberg and Jamie Margolin. We focus on these 2 individuals as they're directly connected to the We Don't Have Time campaign and business plan. And below this, she just has a photo, and it says, the Climate Reality Project and Global Utmaning, Greta Thunberg at far left. And the quote says, "How do we ensure that today's decision makers benefit and learn from young people's commitment to the future?" On September 26, the question attracted over 250 visitors to the Kulturhuset Stadstirtern, where Global Utmaning and Al Gore's Climate Reality Project arranged seminars. And she has a photo from that event. Greta Thunberg looking a heck of a lot younger than she does now, so it's from a few years back. Thunberg has stated repeatedly that her strike will continue, quote, until Sweden is aligned with the Paris Agreement. Therefore, by her own statements, this is the singular overall purpose and goal of the strike. The foundation of the Paris Agreement is the expansion of nuclear, the financialization of nature, further privatization at an unprecedented scale, large-scale CO2 reduction, carbon capture storage, a desperate attempt to revitalize economic growth, and more market solutions that will further perpetuate our multiple crises. Therefore, the Thunberg campaign is in part to create a demand upon governments across the globe to align with the Paris Agreement, a demand to obtain what the ruling classes have already decided to unleash on us, our planet, and all life. As adherence to the Paris Accords is a running theme in the mainstream NGO movement, the marketing campaign is helped along by 350.org, Avaaz, World Wildlife Fund, Greenpeace, in tandem with the United Nations program called Changing Together, the World Bank in a program called Stepping Up, and more recently the World Economic Forum. And here's a quick tweet that she's embedded from early December of last year, 2018, by Greta Thunberg, and it says, "Today, I am at the Action Hub with UNFCCC." That's one of the United Nations programs. The panel at World Bank Youth Unstoppable, press conference with Extinction Rebellion and scientists warning, COP24. The Global Utmaning think tank cites its main asset as its network of over 90 senior advisors. From its homepage, it states, and this is a quote, "The global market economy has lifted millions of people out of poverty. Meanwhile, inequality increased significantly. The financial system must be globally regulated and the current economic stagnation broken. It requires a new green, circular, and inclusive growth model that creates value, labor, and welfare. What is tomorrow's new economic story?" End quote. Global Utmaning recently announced a partnership with Global Shapers, an initiative of the World Economic Forum that brings together young leaders worldwide. And here's a quote, "The World Economic Forum Annual Meeting 2019 will be held from January 22nd to 25th in Davos Cloisters, Switzerland. Over 3,000 global leaders will come together under the theme Globalization 4.0, shaping a global architecture in the age of the Fourth Industrial Revolution." And she's added emphasis on that Fourth Industrial Revolution bit. And Greta Thunberg has a little tweet from January of this year talking about her presence at that Davos forum. Next, Cory is going to discuss the organization Avaaz. Here we will make some brief observations of both Avaaz and 350.org in relation to the global climate strike campaigns. An exhaustive body of research that lays bare the function and ancestry of both NGOs based on investigations from 2012 to the present now exist on the Wrong Kind of Green website. I encourage readers to familiarize themselves with these two entities. On December 14, 2018, 350.org sent out a press release containing the following excerpts, and she's quoted those. Katowice, Poland. Today, 30 school children from 3 local schools in Katowice answered the call of Greta Thunberg and brought the global climate strike into the final day of the UN climate talks in Katowice. The 30 students were granted special access to enter the UN talks and carry their message to the delegates and Polish government. With only 12 years left to get the world off fossil fuels, leaders must act now. On cue, the international media would publish photos such as this one, and it's a big picture of those youth leaders with a big climate strike banner and hashtag. Here's what you don't see. And these are images of all sorts of well-to-do world leaders and things of that nature. And yet it certainly appears that Avaaz did in fact play a leading role in organizing the action while orchestrating the media spotlight. On the day following the 350.org Avaaz press release, December 15, 2018, NGOs and institutions alike scrambled to catapult the words of Thunberg into the hearts and minds of citizens all over the world. From the UN to Avaaz to the World Bank to grassroots resistance, they all clamored to spread young Thunberg's words. But one NGO took it upon itself to redact many of Thunberg's words, releasing an abbreviated version. With no disclaimer to its audience, Avaaz removed 4 excerpts from Thunberg's speech. The 2 excerpts that follow, which were cut by Avaaz, are most revealing, and she quotes them. 2 of the excerpts that have been cut from Greta's speech are most revealing, and here's the first one. You only speak of the green, eternal economic growth because you are too scared of being unpopular. You only talk about moving forward with the same bad ideas that got us into this mess, even when the only sensible thing to do is pull the emergency brake. And then the next one, but I don't care about being popular. I care about climate justice and a living planet. Our civilization is being sacrificed for the opportunity of a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money. It is not surprising Avaaz would strike Greta's comments, considering a primary function of Avaaz is to promote market solutions that accelerate green economic growth, in servitude to a very small number of people to continue making enormous amounts of money. I think this is interesting to hear she's kind of intimating, but not saying directly, that Greta Thunberg may be kind of being used by these organizations and not necessarily fully in the know as to what their end goals are. But we'll keep going in the series to get a better sense of that. In the following Avaaz campaign, the NGO employs Thunberg's face to place pressure on Sweden for corporate non-solutions, such as, in this instance, large-scale CO2 reduction. This is holistic framing for carbon capture storage technologies. Here it is imperative to refer to the August 24th, 2017 press release, Bologna Seminar on Nordic CCS Cooperation. And here's the quote. "Now politicians have to go ahead so that we can build full-scale CO2 capture facilities as quickly as possible," said Thunberg. 3 full-scale facilities in Norway are planned, but not yet granted, with a preliminary price tag of 1.28 billion euros. Norway is leading in capture, transportation, and storage technologies, and can export the knowledge and facilities. There is potential for a completely new industry to be built. However, it depends on whether Norway is able to keep its position. It is urgent to build the CCS plants, develop the technology further, and get full-scale CCS infrastructure, and a Nordic cooperation can facilitate in this process." End quote. This is a prime example of one of the main functions of NGOs, to generate popular demand from the citizenry that will in turn support the legislation required for projects that serve to benefit industry rather than people and planet. Prior to the contracts being signed or a shovel breaking the ground to build the infrastructure that will comprise the global architecture in the age of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, legislation is required. And just like a proverbial snowball turning into an avalanche, the legislation begets money for a budget with bidding and construction to commence shortly thereafter. What better way to create a demand for something detrimental to both the environment and the populace than to package it under climate change solutions, with the lovely and innocent face of Greta? With reality turned on its head, industry doesn't have to impose its will on the people. The people will impose it on themselves, via Avaaz and all of these other types of organizations. The people are thus engineered to demand the very false solutions that the corporations have had up their sleeves for years and even decades. Hence, the nonprofit industrial complex and the media, both financed and funded by the world's power elite, are amalgamated with and by corporate power. Together, they work in unity toward one common goal: economic growth. Hence, market solutions are always the solutions. It is not simply a matter of placing the economy first before everything else. Rather, it's placing the economy first at the expense of everything else, and everyone else, and all life on this planet. To look at the scale of such so-called solutions, one need look no further than the 2013 Carbon Tracker Unburnable Carbon Report, page 12, quote, "Given that the average annual rate of storage in 2015 is projected by the Global Carbon Capture and Storage Institute 2012 to be about 2.25 million tons for 16 CCS projects, a total of nearly 3,800 CCS projects would need to be operating by 2050 under the idealized scenario." End quote. The idealized scenario offers about an 80% chance of not exceeding a warming of more than 2 degrees Celsius. And then again, another quote from May 14th, 2015. "As with all the shaping of our shared futures by the elite, the pathway to CCS is clear in the 2008 Green Alliance paper, A Last Chance for Coal, with contributions from Ben Caldecott while at the Policy Exchange think tank. The paper notes that it is critical Europe's commitment to CCS be realized before 2020, 12 short years away from the paper's publication date. The year 2020 is a critical date of vast significance, a recurring deadline for all environmental market solutions to be in place. Now, this is very interesting, and Cory has bolded this piece. But again, we were being told through the IPFF report, and it's all over the place right now, that we have 12 years to stop catastrophic climate change from irrevocably damaging the planet. And here she's saying they've got earmarked 2020 as the date where they really need to get going on all this stuff for all of these market solutions to kind of solidify. So that's a very interesting statement, and that's why she's bolded it. And she's offered some ideas for further reading as well. So take a look at the post. Like I said, I'll link it in the podcast. Next section. Jamie Margolin, 0 Hour. Jamie Margolin is the teenage founder of This Is 0 Hour and one of the 13 plaintiffs suing Washington State for its failure to take adequate action on climate change. As disclosed in Act 1 of this series, Margolin and her NGO 0 Hour accounted for 2 of the 6 accounts tagged by the We Don't Have Time on the very first post regarding Greta Thunberg's school strike. Margolin attended Al Gore's Climate Reality Leadership Corps, a 3-day conference that took place in Seattle on June 27th to 29th, 2017. In July 2017, Margolin began organizing for a youth climate march in Washington, D.C., and launched 0 Hour. On February 27, 2018, exactly 8 months after her first day at the Climate Reality Leadership Corps, Margolin would be featured in Rolling Stone magazine. Prior to her meteoric rise to stardom, Margolin interned in Hillary Clinton's campaign office in Seattle. The following passage demonstrate what has now become the normal corporate promotion of youth. And here's the quote. The youngest speaker at the Global Climate Action Summit in San Francisco this week is Jamie Margolin of Seattle, who founded the 0 Hour Youth Climate March this past July and led its flagship action in Washington, D.C. At 16, Margolin presents a youthful contrast to most of the GCAS leadership, like California Governor Jerry Brown, 80 at the time, former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, 76 at the time, and China's top climate diplomat Xi Zhenhao, who is 68 at the time. In the 21st century, manufactured movements and revolutions, today's leaders, fabricated by corporate-owned and funded media, are no longer enemies of the establishment. Rather, they do events together with establishment figures, such as New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio adulating over our new revolutionaries while tagging them and tweeting their praises. When the establishment itself loves our movements and our faces of the future, we know we've already lost tomorrow. And here she's got some photos of some of these folks. And here's a quick photo of Jamie Margolin, and it says, on cue, on December 5th, 2018, Time magazine voted Greta Thunberg as one of the most influential teens, now the most sought-after and targeted demographic by corporations, of 2018, while Jamie Margolin, founder of 0 Hour, climate reality leader and teen influencer, was lauded over by Teen Vogue. Interesting. And then there's a whole bunch of citations there. And here they've got basically pictures of these different teenagers at these kind of big-ticket events, where they show them in front of a huge corporate banner getting their portraits taken. In the above image, Margolin lends her celebrity status to prop up the brands Global Citizen and Johnson & Johnson. Global Citizen is perhaps the most egregious NGO in the nonprofit industrial complex, with its grotesque model of shallow, hollowed-out activism and corporatization. Recently, Global Citizen has introduced points that can be accumulated by clicking on actions. In a blatant emulation of credit cards, the more money you spend, the more points you acquire. The more actions you click, the more points you acquire. These points can then be redeemed for access to celebrity events and concerts. This is the social engineering of unquestioning compliance and instantaneous acquiescence. In order to receive the reward, one must perform the action requested. If you do not comply, you simply do not receive the points. Here the encouragement for critical thought and debate is deliberately and strategically erased from the equation. NGOs are not the only entities to exploit youth. Corporate partners that finance their endeavors also provide lofty sums of money to have their toxic legacies greenwashed. In July 2018, Johnson & Johnson was ordered to pay nearly $4.7 billion in total damages to 22 women and their families after they claimed asbestos in Johnson & Johnson talcum powder contributed to their ovarian cancer. In the first case against the company that focused on asbestos in the powder. Remember when this came out in the news a little while back. 6 of the 22 plaintiffs in the latest trial have died from ovarian cancer. Mark Lanier, lead counsel for the plaintiffs, said in a statement that Johnson & Johnson had covered up evidence of asbestos in their products for more than 40 years. Par for the course, partnerships and endorsements for corporations inflicting violence upon both children and planet are a hallmark of the nonprofit industrial complex. This is not the only lawsuit that has been launched against Johnson & Johnson, nor will it be the last. There are also 1,200 pending lawsuits in the U.S. alone against this corporate entity. Johnson & Johnson is not the exception. It is the normal. And here's some more photos from some of these events with Jamie Margolin sitting down talking with, Bill Gates and people like that. All right, next up was a quote here from Jamie Margolin speaking via Skype at the Climate Emergency Plan presentation, which was convened by We Don't Have Time, Climate Utmaning, and the Club of Rome. And this is from November 24th, 2018. She says, quote, "We don't just think about, there's carbon in the air and we need to lower it. We think of how did the carbon get there? Like how did we allow a system that could lead us to such destruction?" End quote. The system that Margolin refers to is that of global capitalism, an economic system that is devouring everything in its path, a promise to destroy the planetary ecosystems of our shared futures. And it's not as though Margolin has not begun to understand the glaring systems intersecting at the nexus of our multiple crises, such as capitalism, colonialism, racism, and patriarchy. Rather, Margolin does in fact possess the basic building blocks of knowledge that are required for the long road ahead of instilling and inspiring the revolutionary changes that are required amongst the youth. Yet by positioning herself with those that bring into fruition and profit from everything Margolin touches upon, she tragically denigrates her own analysis by merely calling for better cups for Starbucks rather than the elimination of Starbucks altogether. Hence, on her current path, Margolin does more harm than good for the very systemic issues she articulates so well. With crude capitalists such as Gore, de Blasio, and others now capturing the last vestiges of youth that even have such awareness, and an awareness that is slowly dying out, soon the systemic structures that allow capitalism and oppression to flourish will have no opposition whatsoever. We're reaching the point where there's no distinction between our movements and the coalitions created to further our oppression and servitude. The fact that Margolin serves as a face for Al Gore's Climate Reality Project, when saving capitalism is Gore's #1 priority, as we'll learn in Act 3, grinds all of Margolin's articulate words and actions to dust. Gore uses Greta, Margolin, and all the youth they mobilize by destroying the very futures these youth are hoping to save, all in servitude to economic growth and capitalism for the world's power elite. Also of relevance to the Thunberg campaign is the race to capture the millennial and Generation Z. With increasing frequency, this capture is primarily achieved by the manufactured and heavily funded youth movements, teeming with potential consumers, fully exploitable by those that benefit from, and in many cases contribute to, the steady stream of funding. The title Generation Z has been applied to those connected from birth to online media, to whom instant gratification is the norm. Today, this demographic is the most powerful and sought-after audience in North America, As an illustration of the term's popularity, 0 Hours Margolin actually refers to herself as Generation Z. The November 8, 2018 Barclays article, Gen Z, Step Aside Millennials, reports that this demographic, children born between 1995 and 2009, the same demographic that youth leaders like Greta Thunberg and Jamie Margolin belong to, appeal to, and influence, are quickly becoming the new consumer giants and mega influencers. And here's a quote. By 2020, Generation Z will be the largest group of consumers globally. They will account for 40% of consumers in the US, Europe, and BRIC countries, and 10% in the rest of the world. Companies that don't engage with Gen Z successfully could rapidly lose the market share. Some of them may only be 9 years old, but Gen Z already have huge spending power. In the US, Gen Z currently have $200 billion in direct buying power, but $1 trillion in indirect spending power by influencing household spending. Gen Z's advanced digital knowledge and ability to assess factors such as price and availability from a young age make them increasingly influential in family spending decisions. End quote. In the eyes of bankers and capitalists, this group of youth are mere consumers, dollar signs, not children, youth, or even people. Faux activism comes with many perks, inclusive of six-figure salaries, jet setting, and TED Talks, plus the best hipster eco-brands money can buy. Perhaps the most enticing perk is access to the halls of power. With the media fawning all over every reformist word, the faux activist can fall in love with her own image all over again. Everyone wants to be a star. Everyone wants to live the luxurious life. Everyone wants to belong to the champagne circuit. All on the backs of the most oppressed, all on the backs of the most vulnerable. Yet the paradox is this: we are their vehicle. Our resistance captured and channeled directly back into the very systems crushing us. Greta Thunberg is being strategically exploited by the World Bank, the UN, and the nonprofit industrial complex that serves the ruling classes. They're using her to advance their own self-interests and objectives that are in direct opposition to everything this young woman brilliantly articulates. This is being presented as a leaderless movement, very much the new power methodology and religion for the capitalists, theorized by Jeremy Hymans of Avaaz for mass movement building, that serves the most powerful and destructive forces on the planet. The manipulation of young, malleable minds is at the foundation of Western indoctrination, in order to insulate a failing system and mask the market solutions being designed to address it. Market solutions that benefit the rich at the expense of the environment. Hence, the youth are always the sacrificial lambs of the nonprofit industrial complex. And that's the end of Act 2. I will get into some more Susie Dawson likely next week. I still want to get to this longer Stan Goff piece. And Whitney Webb has written a pretty compelling follow-up to her previously 4-part series about Jeffrey Epstein and everything that he is connected to. And she's looked into some of the companies and other players that came up during that investigation in a follow-up piece for Mint Press News that I think would be worth reading as well. So stay tuned. I'll get into this hopefully less than a week from now. But right now you can enjoy Act 2 of Cory Morningstar's excellent investigative work and her rather pointed remarks about capitalism, which I do enjoy. Thank you very much, and see you guys soon.